You're listening to the Resilient Author Podcast, the show that goes beyond the pages to explore the grit, courage, and resilience it takes to write and publish a book. I'm your host, Carrie Human, and each week I sit down with authors to uncover the stories behind their stories, the challenges they faced, the breakthroughs they experienced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Whether you're working on your first chapter or celebrating your launch, this is the place to find inspiration and practical takeaways for your own author journey. Let's dive in. My guest today is Sjaastad, author of You're Too Young to Understand, a powerful memoir that takes us inside her childhood, growing up with a mother who lived with schizophrenia and an immigrant father. Through her story, Liz shares what it was like to navigate her parents' struggles from the perspective of a child, teenager, and adult, while also finding ways to cope, to laugh, and to keep going, even in the most difficult moments. Her book is raw, honest, and surprisingly full of humor, showing us that resilience often comes through both pain and laughter. Along the way, Liz opens up about the moral choices she had to make for her mom, the challenges of finishing a book that took 10 years to write, and what it means to set boundaries while also leading with love. This conversation is for anyone who's ever wondered if their story matters, because Liz's journey reminds us that telling the truth about our lives can bring healing, hope, and connection. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. All right, Liz. So for listeners who may not know you yet, can you share what your book is about and what you want most, or what you would hope most readers take away from reading it?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. You're Too Young to Understand is the book's title, and it is a memoir about growing up with two very interesting parents, both with mental health struggles that maybe didn't expose themselves until after they were married and having children. My mother had acknowledged schizophrenia. She had anosognosia, so she didn't have insight into her illness. And my father, though both of them were brilliant, he was a professor of many languages. He was an immigrant to the United States and a child of World War II, and I think used alcohol to help kind of cope with a lot of stuff in his life. But when you grow up, those are your parents, and that's what it's all about. My book is about forgiveness and resilience, and the second part of the book is taking care of my parents while they're at the end of their lives, and a little bit of reclamation on my part as I dive into trying to understand who they are, who they were, why they made the choices that they made. So yeah, I think I've heard people have a lot of takeaways from my book, very different from one another. And so I feel like there's quite a few universal truths in here that speak to different people in different ways. But I think a big one is about uh, creating boundaries with our loved ones when we need to, but also how to show up for them and protect yourself at the same time. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, there are a lot of different themes there that I definitely want to dive into. But let's go back to the beginning for a moment. I would love to hear just how the idea to even come up with this book even came to you, because you're dealing with some pretty, for a lot of people, these are taboo topics. They don't want to talk about this. They don't want people to know. When did this idea come to you?
Yeah, that is so true. We live with these secrets kind of because you don't talk about them. They are taboo, and that stigma really does and shame, I guess, that comes out of stigma is sticks with you, and it's not super healthy. And for me, once I started talking about my family's history with more people than a tight circle, it became more and more liberating. And instead of feeling additional shame or judgment, I got a lot of, wow, I cannot believe that this is how you grew up. It's so different from how I grew up. And you seem to be leading a really beautiful life right now. And so that's it. It was mostly positive once I did start talking about it. My sister and I needed to talk with healthcare providers about my mom's schizophrenia. At the time, she had um, she had medical power of attorney for my dad when my dad had had a massive stroke, and she was the one making decisions about his life, and we were doing whatever we could to try to take that away and make his wishes known because she didn't have the wherewithal to do it. And so um, we did start talking about it more broadly at that point. But it turns out it didn't get us. We hold on to the weight of this word, this word schizophrenia, like it's going to, something's going to, blow up if our lives are going to blow up if we tell people we were raised by someone with schizophrenia. So we don't share and we don't share. So then when you think, I'm going to share it now and it's going to make all the difference in the world, and we're going to be able to get medical power of attorney for our father if these doctors know that our mother has schizophrenia. And so it didn't work that way because one of the struggles in the book that came up repeatedly with my mother and my father is that they're independent people in the eyes of the law, and you cannot take away that independence and their rights very easily, which is a super important law to have, but it leaves a lot of people struggling with how to care for people in their lives that they're expected to care for. Anyway, I decided to write the book after my father did pass away, and we didn't have a funeral service for him because our family was what it was. And so it helped me to kind of process the grief by starting to write my memories.
Hmm.
Not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, no,
I
no,
got off
no,
topic a
absolutely.
little.
No, 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 not at all. So it sounds like for you, this was therapeutic. Like this was your way to heal and to sort of, I guess, like you said, have some closure.
Yeah.
Mm, that's
Uh,
that's powerful.
so it was absolutely something that my sister and I had talked about, how a lot of people told us that we should write a book. You have such an interesting story, you should write a. And so while I did think I was writing a book, while I wrote it, it was completely, while I wrote the first couple of versions of what ended up becoming You're Too Young to Understand, it was very cathartic. And it felt horrible and it felt incredible. It was, I suppose, when people go through therapy, they go through a lot of pain and struggle if they're working on things. But then, there's also a lot of aha moments and a lot of, um, deeper understanding about yourself and the world as you do it. And that happened to me with writing the first couple versions of the book.
Mm. One of the first things that stood out about your book, Liz, is the title. Can you talk a little bit about just how you decided on that particular title?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I know a lot of your audience, they're writers, and um, our essays, our books go through so many different titles, I think. And I wasn't sure how I would land on the right one. It had several over the course of the 10 years that it was on my plate as a project. Um, and I would run like, oh, I'd have this great idea of, this is the title, and my writing group would go, what? That's not a good title for your book. And so they were always right. Like I wouldn't just take their opinion uh face value. I would let it sit for a while and I'd be like, yeah, they're right. You're Too Young to Understand was something that my mother said to me often. I When I was young, of course she said it. When I asked what I tried to decipher her um some of the things that she would say that didn't make sense because of her schizophrenia, because of her delusions and her disjointed thinking. Um, when I was young, and I was getting older, I would try to parse out the truth in what she was saying because I was
Mm.
um, very much wanting to understand. And she would often say, "You're too young to understand."
Mm.
When I got older, I asked her why she and my dad didn't get divorced, if they were so miserable together. And I said, "If you're waiting for me to graduate high school, you don't have to." And she said, "Then you're too young to understand." Or the other one would be, um, "Maybe when you're older, I'll tell you."
Mm.
Um, with the same connotation that I was too young to understand. And, it's got other layers of meaning. The mental health um, industry often has not talked to children about mental illnesses because, quote unquote, they're too young to understand. However, there's a lot that could have been talked to me about that would have helped a lot in terms of me understanding my parents' illnesses. Um, yeah, so and I think it's a title that like everyone heard at some point in their life and had an emotional reaction. Because like you don't ever want to be told you're too young to understand something, like so I think it gave my publisher the marketing person and my publisher goosebumps. So I said, okay, that's the one we're gonna do.
Yeah, it definitely pulled me in. I
Yeah.
said to myself, like, I'm too young to understand. What is this book about? Let me read this. Really good title. You said something, Liz, that really it just kind of stood out. You said it took you 10 years. This has been a project you've had for 10 years. You and I both know, every author hits roadblocks, starts and stops. Was there ever a point during that process where you wondered if the book would ever even come to life? And if so, could you talk about that process?
I think monthly that was it's quite a roller coaster. And I really the writing groups and classes that I took were always my way back in. But regularly I would say, what am I doing? What there's a lot of criticism of memoir out there by people who don't, I think, maybe think too deeply about the potential of memoir. But I would start to hear those people in my heads, like, who wants to read your story? Like, you're not a famous person. Um, where's my audience for this? Or it's just too hard to write. This is just too emotionally difficult. There were many reasons why I put it on the shelf regularly. One time it was on the shelf for 2 whole years. I didn't touch it,
Oh.
but it just interrupted my daily life still. So I couldn't get it off my mind. So I had to go back to it. Um, and uh, uh, trying to think, there was one other time, and it was when it was done. Like I was like, okay, I think it's done for me. I've set out to do what I have to do, but I'm not going to publish it. I'm not going to go down that path. And then a woman in my writing group took me aside for coffee and she said, "So let's talk about this a little more. Like what's stopping you?" And I just said, I don't think it's living up to like the books that I read, the memoirs that I read, and the kind of takeaways that I want people to have after reading my book. I don't think it's doing that. And she
Mm.
said, "Well, why don't we read it together like a book club? And you can tell me the parts, we could just like talk through it a little bit more." And so we ended up doing that with the writing group, and it was really affirming that no, this was a book that needed to be out in the world. And
Mm.
so I really credit her. Her name's Jen, and
Thank you,
uh,
Jen.
yes, thank you, Jen, so much. Yeah, she knows. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all need someone like that in our life. It sounds like even in those tough moments through that 10-year period, something kept you going. Would you say that was sort of the turning point where you just said like this has to get out, or was there something sort of previous to that where you told yourself like no matter what, I'm gonna finish this book?
I did. When I first started writing it, I said, no matter what, I'm going to finish. I'm going to make this a book because I knew what my narrative was going to be, for the most part, and I didn't know what was going to fill in the different chapters because I hadn't written them yet. But I kind of had the arc of the story, and and it really was a promise to myself that I was going to finish it, and mm, I'm not necessarily someone who always finishes everything that they start. That's putting it lightly. So it was a big promise, and so I did finish it. And I think then that next stage, I never promised that I would publish it.
Mm.
So that was where I had a lot more angst, um, and a little bit of confusion and fear, a lot of fear about putting it out in the world. But
Mm.
10 years is a long time to have that fixed.
It is, but you got it done. That's beautiful though. I'm really glad you stuck with it. You know, one thing that I'm always curious about, specifically when I speak to people who write memoirs, you know, you have siblings, you have family, you have people who know the people that you're talking about. How did you work through that? Like, did you have to get permission from people? Did you read through? Like, what was that process like of sharing this intimate story, but knowing that you would have family members who may have had a completely different experience around it?
Yeah. Yeah, so my my sister is probably the most present character in the book, particularly in the second half.
Mm.
And she and my brother is a big character in the book as well, but he passed away um, in 2016 while I was writing it. Um, my mother's still alive, but she's in a memory care facility and she doesn't know who I am. Um, my sister, I would send her chapters, and she she was just really affirming of everything that I was doing. And when I needed help with details, my sister is 6 years older than me. She would help me fill in some details. I'd be like, remember when we were in that counseling office and, I was 8, but, she was 14. So her memories were much stronger. So she helped me kind of create some of the scenes a little bit, um, in terms of setting and maybe what she was going through or what she remembered wearing and things. So there were a lot of details she helped fill in for me. But so she had pretty much read the whole book. And of course, I gave her the whole thing to read before it was done in the editing process, the publishing process. And then every person that I wanted to give their real name, I had to send them either a copy of the book or the section that they were in to get their okay. Um, and everyone said okay. There are a few small characters that I've given different names, and changed kind of any identifying characteristics, but they're small enough that they probably wouldn't have a problem with being in it anyway. It's not damaging to their character at all. Uh, so yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's just something I'm always curious to hear how people navigate. It sounds like for you it was pretty smooth. So
But smooth, but it was like I had to track down some people. There are people I couldn't
mm,
find. Like my
mm,
girlfriend Sherry, when we were 13, there's some scenes in there that Sherry and I get into some trouble when we're 13 years old, 14 years old, and I wanted to use her name, and her mom was important to me in the book, and so I finally tracked her down, and so it took a lot of time.
mm,
But what's interesting, this a book that just came out, I don't want to get off topic, but this huge book that just came out, huge memoir that came out, and there's a lot of controversy going on because she calls out an abuser from her middle school years,
mm,
but and doesn't use his name, but it's he's identifiable,
mm.
and it just strikes me as like publishing 101 that you wouldn't do. But so there's making sure the people who you love and you had great experiences with, that they're okay with what you write. but there's also, you've got to be careful that, you aren't going to ruin someone's life and get in trouble for it.
Yeah, definitely a fine line.
Yeah.
Um, so Liz, you're a published author now. I'm very curious. How did writing this book change you, either personally or even in your work? What's shifted for you?
I think personally, writing the book and then publishing it um, uh, has changed me more than anything in my life except motherhood. Um, I I really found my voice through writing this book, and um, there are a lot of things that come with being raised um, in a neglectful or bizarre, or my father was an alcoholic, so very unpredictable environment. And if you look to psychologists, they'll say, well, they're not going to do well. Those kids are not going to do well because this, and this, the ACEs score and so on that they give. Um, and I think there are some aspects to my childhood that include kind of wanting to keep the peace. You don't want to disrupt things because you want your environment to be as stable as possible. And so I would make myself very small, and uh, I wouldn't, um, I wouldn't ask for what I needed. So that carried through, I think, into my adulthood, as I always wanted people in the room to be happy before I considered my own sense of well-being. And so, I think it's been a lifelong process, but certainly writing this book, I was allowed to really fully embrace who I am, what my opinions are, what I went through, what those impacts were on me, and how I could use my voice to help other people. And so it's carried on. I do a lot of work in the mental health world and want to do more. And I think my book is really touching people as well. So it definitely has changed me personally and professionally.
Mm. That's really good to hear. I think a lot of people in general, when it comes to writing a book, it's the writing the book, but then you also talked about the publishing process, how you didn't initially commit to that. Could you talk a little bit about your publishing process? I'm not sure if you self-published, if you went traditional, was it a hybrid? Could you just share kind of that journey of actually publishing your book? Was it hard? Was it easy? Was it what you expected?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to be a part of the Loft Literary Center here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it's a beautiful place for artists, teaching artists and students to come together. I took a lot of classes there, and I received the um, Mentor Series Fellowship one year, which was phenomenal. I got to work with Kiese Lehman and Annika Fajardo as my mentors that year. That was really the year that the book came together.
Mm.
Um, and also during those classes and fellowships, we got a lot of education about the traditional publishing industry. We also got information about the other ways to publish, but mostly the traditional publishing industry. And I think that was one of the reasons I was like, wow, this is like a huge winner of the lottery type of situation. Like you've written an excellent book. It's been well edited, and it's still your chances of getting an agent are like 5%. And then they need to go and sell your book to a publisher. And meanwhile, for me, I've spent 9, 10 years on the book, and now that's going to be another 3 years, maybe. So I did a bunch of math. I actually wrote an essay on how I published, why I published, with some different stats from the industry. It's
Mm.
in writersdigest.com. How I found therapy in writing, and then liberation and hybrid publishing, which is what I ended up doing. Um, so finding an agent, I did look for an agent for a short period of time, and I was told to apply or to query at least 100 agents, but only 20 at a time. And when most don't get back to you at all if they are not interested. But if they do, learn from it. after 20, if you don't have a hit, revise your query letter, revise the pages you're sending them, start over with your next 20. And I really didn't have the patience for that, particularly knowing that traditional publishers, the books that are published in traditional publishing, 90% of them sell under 2,000 copies. 90% of them under 2,000 copies. They spend 2% of their overall budget on marketing. And because you're always like, well, you need someone to market your book. I don't know. And they give up on books if they're not successful within the first 3 months. Then they don't put any more money in them. They take 85 to 90% of your income of the proceeds from the book, and your agent takes 20% of that 15% that you get. So somewhere down the road, you might make $1 on your book. Somewhere down the road.
Brutal.
So like nobody goes in, I don't think many people go into writing anyway to make money. But if that was one of your reasons to go traditional, like, so I kind of looked at all the options. I really didn't want to do full self-publishing. And I heard about, I went to an event where there was a woman, Brooke Warner, with She Writes Press, really disruptive woman in the publishing industry. She's super smart. And I learned about hybrid publishing from her. So there are these hybrid organizations that will, you submit directly to them. You don't need an agent. They decide whether they want to publish your book. It's a lot easier to get published with them. The ones I submitted to told me they took about 20% of the submissions. And so I had 3 hybrids to choose from, 2 in Minnesota, and then the one at She Writes Press out in Berkeley, California. And I ended up going with one here in Minnesota called Wise Inc. And the hybrid is different in that it kind of flipped the model upside down. And the author pays for the project management, the editing, the art design, and distribution. But then as soon as it's published, in most cases, the author has 100% of the proceeds. So I ended up doing that with Wise Inc., which is their model. And I couldn't be happier. I've got the most beautiful book and the best experience. Who knows if I'll make my money back? I think it's not an option for a lot of people, but they do a lot of Kickstarter campaigns. I started to think of it like an entrepreneur who doesn't expect to make money. But, this is my baby. Like, I want to make decisions. I want to, and that's what I was able to do. I was led by a team of experts, but ultimately I got to choose, if I wanted to make a certain edit, or if I wanted the title to be what it was, and that sort of thing. So I'm very happy with the process, but it's a lot of work being out there on your own as an independent author. But it's also been a lot of fun. I've had really.
Thank you for sharing that process.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up here. I just have 2 more questions for you. But for listeners who, may be carrying their own book, but may feel stuck, maybe it's been there for 10 years, maybe it's been there for a couple of weeks. What would you want them to know about the process? Any insight you could share?
The process of publishing or writing?
How about both?
Okay. I think with writing, for most people, it's important to not think of it as a solo effort. Like, of course, you're writing your own words, you're writing your own paragraphs, but I think in order to have the resilience, to have the stick-to-itiveness, to keep going, you need a community. And so I just highly recommend classes and writing groups, or finding a mentor, or just someone to write with or collaborate with. I think that 80% of the world wants to write a book, and 1% actually does. I think that the writers who are in that group don't finish because it's a really hard thing to do alone. And so you get a lot of encouragement and a lot of great input from a community. And then for publishing, I would say just look at all your options. Like
Mm.
I'm not putting down the traditional route at all. I feel like if you've got the energy for it and you've got the time, um, I'd go for it. And I would take that advice. Don't stop at 20 queries of agents, go to 100, keep at it and see how far you can get, but also know that there are other great ways to get your book into the world. And
Mm.
in today's digital world, it's a lot easier on the distribution end of things too.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure some people will be able to pull some things from that. Um, so what's next for you, Liz? Do you have any other plans for your book right now? Is there anything you're really wanting to do with your book or with your story?
Yeah, it's resonating with a lot of people that had kind of interesting childhoods for one reason or another, like I did, but also others. I am a part of NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, and our state conference is coming up, and I'm going to be doing a workshop there with a psychologist who works with families. I think a lot of the efforts to help people um, with who are the ones that have the mental illness, and then sometimes we forget about their families, and so that's kind of her focus. And then I'm in there for my lived experience, and we'll also have author tables with our books there. But I just think that that's one sliver of my audience because the feedback I get, it's not just the mental illness kind of theme that is attracting people. So definitely broadening out a lot of bookstores, a lot of podcasts, efforts like that.
That's
Yeah.
great.
May I show my cover?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. There it is.
It's such a great job. Is that you hanging out the window?
It's supposed to be me, but it's not really me. It definitely could be. Um,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah,
How many pages are in there, Liz?
The book is 255 pages,
255?
and
Okay.
and then I have some reflection questions for like clubs or just thinking at the end. Um,
Uh,
a woman I know in academia said it'd be really great for a book for her students, particularly with those questions at the end.
That's a really nice touch. I imagine too, when you were talking about the book club, did you have those questions in there already? Like, were you all working through the questions in the club?
Did I say book club?
Or
Or
maybe it was the meeting group where you all were reading the book out loud with
uh,
Jen when you all were
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, maybe I said book club, but it was my writing group.
writing group. Writing group.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. She's my writing group. Jen was a part of that. Oh, but right. We decided to take my book. I see where you're coming from. We decided to take my book as if it were our book club book.
Got it.
As if it were already published and we were talking about it in that way so that I could start to see it as a real book. And that's hard to go from just a manuscript and it's your debut book to really see it that way until it's finally published.
100%. This has been fun, Liz. Before we wrap, where can people find your book and stay connected with your journey?
They should go to lizsjaastad.com. It's LIZSJAASTAD. There's a navigation button for my book, and then there are places to purchase it there. It's on Amazon, my distributor, Itasca. If you like bookstores, there are bookstores on there. You can order directly from them. And then, yeah, you can sign up on my website if you'd like a monthly newsletter that talks about the book and my journey with this, as well as my mission regarding mental health advocacy.
Mm, you're doing some great work, and I'll also put that in the show notes for those people who might be driving or yeah, just can't write it down. Liz, anything else you'd like to share before we close out? Anything we missed?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot, but I can't think of anything. Yeah.
Well, if things align, maybe we can revisit this conversation in a few months and see how things have opened up for you.
That would be terrific.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Resilient Author Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you both inspiration and practical tools for your own journey. If you've been carrying the idea for a book, but haven't started, or you started and feel stuck, I'd love to invite you to join my 5-day Speak Your Book Challenge. In just 5 days, you'll speak the outline of your first draft and discover how to turn it into a finished manuscript and a published book. You can join anytime at voicetobook.co/challenge. Until next time, keep going, stay resilient, and remember, your story matters.